कि यहाँ पर मेरा घर था और वो वहाँ से आए थे और उनके हाथ में किसी के हाथ में डंडा था, किसी के हाथ में केरोसिन था, उनको सब याद था एग्जैक्टली। उनको ये भी याद है किसने कौन सी चप्पल पहनी थी। निर्प्रीत टू दर्शन जी टू भागी कौर टू लक्ष्मी टू प्रीतम टू शांति टू अनेक कौर, टिड्डी कौर, it never stopped. I'm a man. I neither I understand it fully, neither ever I will. So I don't think I can write it or I can do any kind of justification with this kind of writing. She said, your gender should be the last thing to stop you, and just don't give opinions, don't mansplain like every man, right? And she said, don't do that. Just be their voice. These conversations were never easy, and I was not in a hurry. So I would go to Nirpreet's home, I would go to Darshanji's home. I would just go and sit there, have chai, sometimes khana kha liya. And I think after good 15-16 months, Darshanji herself said, "Hun tu puchna jada tu puchna hai." And that's how the conversation began. First step is, of course, the acknowledgement of this has happened. And yes, the nation is sorry. The next step is, how do, the perpetrators are punished? And then you move to the reparations and reconciliation. How do you compensate the loss of life?
There is no compensation.
There is no compensation for that. उन बच्चों में से जो बच्चे आज डिप्रेशन में, हो सकता है कोई भारत का प्रधानमंत्री होता, कोई एस्ट्रोनॉट होता, कोई फिल्म एक्टर होता. You've robbed them of that opportunity. And after robbing them of that opportunity, you cannot say that we've given them a compensation. And then again, I think people need to understand that when state is giving you any kind of reparation, it's not a favor, it's an obligation. 84 is the entire issue, if you talk about Delhi massacre, is alive and people are still talking about it, and there are still cases in the court. Yes, there are lawyers, there are organizations who have supported it, but it is because of women. I want to tell every woman sitting here, men try to control you by using different terms.
Yes, they do.
And most of that, they cover it under the garb of love. That it's love, but it's not. They're trying to control you. You lose your agency to them. The Sikh women who picked up guns, a lot of them have told me that they found it liberating. I've asked this question multiple times.
Years of submission, and they finally get to.
They said we were equal. Human rights can never be an internal matter of any government. Human rights is about human beings, and we all have equal rights to speak about it. Teenager, when she narrated it, that she's still single, and she narrated the story that she told her mother, "Mummy, mainu chhad ke na jaye." And those words never left me because her mother was waiting outside for her.
Sat Shri Akal, I welcome you all to this little conversation organized by 1469 and HarperCollins with Sanam Sutirath Wazir. And he's here because he's going to talk about his book, The Kaurs of 1984. It was not an easy book at all. I read it in last 2 days, and every page I was crying. It left me very choked. I don't know how I'm going to have this conversation, because this is not a comfortable conversation. Not because it is also 84, because also my gender, the women, what they went through, the horrors are unimaginable. And I'm just wondering that how did you gather the courage to write it all? Because you listen to the stories, but then you have to sit in front of your laptop and you have to also pour your heart out. So, Sanam, first I want to, thank you for bringing this out, because in times that we are today, it's not easy to write a book like this and bring it out in the public, The Kaurs of 1984. So, I want to know your journey about this book. That when did this begin? कि मैनू ऐ लिखना है, मैनू ऐ दसना है, मैनू ऐ दुनिया नाल सांझा करना है.
Right, and I can speak any English.
Yes, please, any language.
Right. So I think in 2014 I was researching for Amnesty International, and while I was doing my research, I realized that there's still so much that needs to be told, and but I, of course, from Amnesty I had a deadline also to finish the report that we have to do for the 30th anniversary of the 1984. While I finished that, but because I'd met so many victims and survivors. So, those conversations were not leaving me. And I remember one night I was in London, and there I just couldn't sleep. I just went out very early in the morning and started running like a crazy, and came back, called my mother again because of the time distance. I mean, she just slept and all, and I told her that, boss, that I'm having anxiety and not feeling well. She said, no, tell me what happened. And I told her that, this is something which is, just, it is pricking me. And she said that, why don't you write about it? And I said, I'm a man. I neither I understand it fully, neither ever I will. So I don't think, I can write it, or I can do any kind of justification with this kind of writing. She said, your gender should be the last thing to stop you. And just don't give opinions. Don't mansplain like every man, right? And she said, don't do that. Just be their voice. And that's what I tried then. It took another 8 years, of course, to complete that draft. But that's how it began.
So, when you started writing, as in, this year will mark 40 years to that tragedy.
Right.
And I think for them, Diwali has never been the same. No. Because it fell in those months in June and in November. I remember I was 6 when this happened. And in Chandigarh, we used to sit in this fear. Curfew ka siren, I still remember. I still hate that siren. It would ring every day, and my father would go for tours across Punjab, and we used to wait, okay, he'll come back. So I remember the time, and till today, people don't want to talk about it. The elderly in my house, it's a very, very tough conversation. They say anything that happens in the name of religion, they shudder at the thought of it, that hun fer sade piche aange. So this 4 decades of people still imprisoned in that memory, and 4 decades of living that injustice. But the crimes against women, like you've mentioned in your book, there were crimes of revenge and crimes of communism, and women were at the receiving end of it. So, which was the first story that came to you, and that set that path, that I want to meet more and I want to know their story more?
So Nirpreet, I think, was the first one. And when I met Nirpreet, and so for me, to be very honest, I was never in hurry for these stories. I was not there as a reporter who had a deadline like that. So I had enough time with me, and I didn't want to push them, because I know it's like reliving the trauma again, and I'm also guilty of it. Pushing you again to tell me what exactly happened, word by word, and the days. And these conversations are not easy. So I remember at Nirpreet's home, we were sitting, and the discussion began that how she enjoyed studying the subjects that she was studying in one of the prominent colleges in Delhi University, and how from that college she came to Punjab. And then you realize that the state's immediate response to everything is crackdown. And when you crack down, you alienate people. And when you alienate people, you then expect them to follow the law of the land. I don't know, how does that function?
So from Nirpreet, then the story saga begins,
yes,
connecting the dots.
Then Nirpreet to Darshanji to Bhagi Kaur to Lakshmi to Preetam to Shanti to Anek Kaur. Tiddi Kaur, it never stopped.
I think Jasmeet and Satwan's were stories, yes, which really, because you've written about them in a lot of extensively. And some of these women are still alive?
Yeah, they're around.
So this is a multi-generational tragedy that happened, impacted them multi-generational.
Right.
You've interviewed the women. What about the children? Were you able to meet any one of them?
I did speak to children. They're not part of the book. I did interviews with them, but I wanted this book to be very, very specific about women. And so I didn't add those interviews deliberately in the book.
So when you were meeting them, what was the challenge to make you trust them? Because already men had taken away so much from them. So how do they entrust a man to tell the story?
So, like I said, these conversations were never easy, and I was not in a hurry. So I would go to Nirpreet's home, I would go to Darshanji's home. I would just go and sit there, have chai, sometimes khana kha liya, And I think after good 15-16 months, Darshan ji herself said, "Hun tu puchna jada tu puchna aaya." And that's how the conversation began. And then again, it wasn't again like 1 week or 1 month's conversation. We spoke for almost 2-3 years. And then when I started writing also, I wanted them to be part of the process because it's their history, right? And so I would write a chapter and I'll take it back to them. And I'll just narrate everything to them. When they said that they're okay, this is what they want, or, this is exactly how this happened. So that process continued. I think that's why the book took a lot of time, because I was very clear with HarperCollins as well that if the victims and survivors are not comfortable with anything, that will not be part of the book. So till the last, and that I tell you, till the April of this month, Darshan Auntie, Satwan, Nivriji, so there were a lot of corrections that we began made. There were things that they wanted to, they asked me to delete, they asked me to add. So there was a lot of that happening, but I wanted them to be in the process.
So in these 8 years, where were the places that you visited the most, as in the areas that were affected the most? Were you able to go back? Were you able to visit? Because all of them dispersed and they relocated to new cities and new areas.
Right.
But did you go back to the places that they
of course I did.
occurred?
Yeah.
And which was the most concentrated? I believe Trilokpuri was east,
yes.
And block number 32 in Delhi.
Which of course much water has flowed under the Yamuna, and a lot of things have changed there. Demographically, a lot of things have changed. But you go, when you speak to them, and if I have been to these places with the survivors, so my experience was very, very different. Because they would tell me कि यहाँ पर मेरा घर था और वो वहाँ से आए थे और उनके हाथ में किसी के हाथ में डंडा था, किसी के हाथ में केरोसिन था, उनको सब याद था एग्जैक्टली. उनको ये भी याद है किसने कौन सी चप्पल पहनी थी. So they remember it all.
So in your course of 8 years, where do you think that we failed them?
I think
because you're a human rights defender.
Right.
You're a former journalist and a human rights defender, and you've immersed yourself in this historical event, which is still alive in many's memory, and you're living with it. So where do you think that we are still failing them or failed them?
I think, like I said, I've been saying this, that it's a collective failure from all the sides. Where we failing them, if you ask me now. So when we speak of reconciliation, the biggest problem here is that that word doesn't come. We only speak of compensation. I've also asked it to a lot of organizations who work with them that, you demand for compensation. Compensation is it's not the right word. You start with reparation and then you go to reconciliation, and both of them should not come from me, you, or anybody else. It should come from them. They should tell us. The first step is, of course, the acknowledgement of this has happened. And yes, the nation is sorry. The next step is, how do, the perpetrators are punished? And then you move to the reparations and reconciliation. But that should not be like that. I've given 5 lakh rupees. One government will come and say 5 lakh rupees. Other will come and say 3 lakh rupees. And I mean, I'll give you a personal example. So there are still POJK refugees who are still getting the compensation. And it's been over 70 years. So I think this we need to move away from the idea of compensation. I mean, I've never understood that. How do you compensate the loss of life?
There is no compensation.
There is no compensation for that. उन बच्चों में से जो बच्चे आज डिप्रेशन में, हो सकता है कोई भारत का प्रधानमंत्री होता, कोई एस्ट्रोनॉट होता, कोई फिल्म एक्टर होता. You rob them of that opportunity. And after robbing them of that opportunity, you cannot say that we've given them a compensation. And then again, I think people need to understand that when state is giving you any kind of reparation, it's not a favor, it's an obligation. State is not doing you any favor. The problem is that we've started taking state like God. Whatever they say becomes godly. And I mean, just imagine that we celebrate people who crack UPSC, right? How do we celebrate them? It's another kind of celebration. And then those guys become company bahadurs. We are scared to go to, speak to any police officer or an IAS officer because you've given them an impression that he's a company bahadur. He's celebrated from the time he's cracked that exam. And however, his duty is to protect you. He's taken the oath to protect you, but he doesn't do that because The system has constructed things in a way like that. And we don't want to challenge it.
What these women did.
Of course, some of them did.
They still do.
They still do. I mean, I would say that 84 is the entire issue, if we talk about Delhi massacre, is alive and people are still talking about it. And there are still cases in the court. Yes, there are lawyers, there are organizations who have supported it. But it is because of women. It is because of these women.
What happens if this generation of women then goes away? Do their children follow it up? Because they say that books like Zamber, I think one of the gentlemen mentioned, it is very important that we write about this because it has to be kept alive in our collective memory, else we'll lose it.
Yes.
So was that also one of the factors for you to get on it and write it as
exactly that was because that this people are around. I can go and I can speak to them. They will tell me what exactly happened to them. Though I will also say that the foundation has been laid by many other my seniors who have done fantastic jobs. There are many books, but I would say more should come out because maybe I have missed a lot. Like I'll give an example. I was recently speaking somewhere and somebody from the queer community has asked me that you've not spoken about us. So there could be multiple angles that I have missed. Or maybe it didn't come to me that,
So when I was going through the book, the 2-3 things that came out very strongly was that, and the women also say it, that we lost our agency to decide, the agency to do anything. We were just told by our fathers, by our brothers, then by our husbands. Ethe nahi ethe thamata, ethe nahi ethe thamata. Pehla pyo kol, फिर husband, फिर जबरदस्ती married off to some terrorist, then married off to some brother-in-law. Then whatever compensation was given also was snatched away from them. So they lost their agency. And also some of them felt that they were manipulated and exploited also and abandoned. So how do you address that, and how this was brought out very well?
I have a question for you.
Okay, I hope I can.
Do you think women have agency? I mean, generally, do you think women have agency? Do you think men in their households don't tell them, do this, do that, or let's have a joint account?
Yeah,
or let's all of that, where it's
extremely complicated setup.
It is taken a sense of love and all those, I want to say, bullshit terms.
There's so much social conditioning. It's like, they feel that you are deciding.
See, I want to tell every woman sitting here, men try to control you by using different terms.
Yes, they do.
And most of that, they cover it under the garb of love. That it's love, but it's not. They're trying to control you. You lose your agency to them. And I've seen women who are very, very highly educated as well. I'll give an example of my mother as well. Like I've spoken at multiple places. When my father passed away, at my father's funeral, she was expected to dress in a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's a widow now. Her only identity is the man who's dead now. And she has to be a certain way. She said she refused to do that. And she told us very clearly that this is the last time you're meeting your father. Ensure that we give him a very, very warm farewell in our best. Now, imagine when you are a woman like her who's educated, who has some kind of financial support to say these kind of things. But then even she told me that there are multiple times I've been othered. Irrespective of who I am being othered at multiple levels. Now there are women who've not been to school, who've conditioned in a certain way, who don't even know that what are their rights, basically, that it's not a favor to them. And then you push them to a world where they've never been before. So when they stepped out, a lot of them were harassed from their workplaces, by men around, and generally when in our society, women, the moment they step out, they have multiple guardians. Everybody wants to become their custodian.
They become a property.
Of course. And that also has these women have told me that how, they once the husbands were dead, some of them even have to fight with the father-in-laws for the compensation.
Yes.
Because their names were not registered in those lists.
Yes.
And they fought for it. Some of them have to give half of their earnings to the family so that family will keep children, so that they can go out and bring the money.
I think Satwant Kaur had to give away everything. In that her story really.
And she told me, she said, मेरा लाल जोड़ा पहनना शायद मेरे मरे हुए पति को offend कर देता.
Yes. And they still address my Sardar, Mera Sardar.
Yeah.
You know, they still mourn that loss. So, do you think that these women were manipulated in some way and exploited? Or some of the stories were the event of their own volition to the militant outfits?
Oh, when you talk about that, those are two separate things. When you talk about the Sikh women who picked up guns, a lot of them have told me that they found it liberating. I've asked this question multiple times.
Years of submission and they finally get to.
They said we were equal.
We were equals. Yeah, that line is there. At least we were treated equally there.
Yes. And when you ask them, I even asked them again after the book, that do you regret it? They said no.
At great loss and risk to many things. And they were tortured.
Yeah.
Beyond torture, they were tortured.
Yes.
And you've just written, but I shut my eyes and I can just see how the police...
And for me, it was not about what I think about it, what is my opinion. It was about that, the law says you can't do this. Right? You can be a criminal, but you still have rights. Nothing diminishes your rights.
So when you talk about human rights, like you were discussing in the morning also, you said that human rights is not like just contained in one country. Human rights is supposed to be advocated and practiced across the world in an equal manner. We are seeing wars happening everywhere. Right now. The world is burning. So how important has a human rights advocate's job become? And how do you stand up to these giants or these warlords and the kings of chaos?
You mean the government?
I'm going to so diplomatically use my words.
So, I think when any government across the world tells you that it is their internal matter, you should understand that they're trying to cover up. Human rights can never be an internal matter of any government. Human rights is about human beings, and we all have equal rights to speak about it. The place doesn't matter. Because we've seen this. Every time something happens and any external, any other government criticizes, you will hear that it's an internal matter. And this is a standard with every country. It's not just us, it's everywhere. But I think when you have more and more voices, when people will start speaking, and we've seen at multiple places, there are people who speak about it, but the tribe is very small. The tribe is very, very small. And then different governments across the world have different policies to, crush the dissent and to how do you crack down on these organizations. So when you don't have a support, when you don't have the organizations like that, you don't see a change. But when we have very, very recent examples, because when the pressure increases, there are movements that will come out.
So there are human rights, but I feel there are women and child rights. So should there be another, legislature that women rights, they need more rights?
I think human rights are women rights, women rights are human rights.
But I think they need a little bit more incentive in terms of rights, that the first word and to have the last word. So in this book, there is a place that you went to, Untold.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about it? Did you revisit it? Were you able to?
I did go there again. The scenes are very scary when you enter the village. And it was a flourishing village
in Haryana.
In Haryana.
So Untold was a flourishing village in Haryana, and of Sikhs. It was a cluster of farmhouses, which was thriving.
Very thriving.
And during 84, it was just...
So they were, and their villagers tried to protect them. The locals around from the village tried to protect them, but they were overpowered. When they were overpowered, when the people from the other villages also came in, they were overpowered. A complete massacre happened there. And those who were saved, they moved to Ludhiana.
What drew you to Untold? Because there must have been other places, but what drew you to this particular place and write about it and give it that much space in the book?
Well, when you're
the mass graves of Untold.
Right. When you're researching, I think to To be very, very honest, for me, it was not like a script. I was taking every day, if there is a story, I will go there. As a researcher, I think that's my job, to look for it, to dive deeper and honed, of course, because it was not spoken about.
I also heard it for the first time.
We knew about Kanpur, we knew about all the other places in the country where exactly what was happening, but this place was not spoken about. It only came out when Manvinder Singh Yaspuria went there, and
no one lives there now.
No one lives there now.
Ghost town.
It's a ghost town.
And in Delhi, what at that time also we heard stories, and through cinema also, when films are made, it is it is heartwarming to hear stories where Muslim and Dalit families took in people and helped them. So there is a lot of help coming from quarters where people want to just see divisions.
So I think
did you have more stories like that?
Yes, there were many stories of hope in Delhi. There were many Hindu neighbors who saved their neighbors. There were many Muslim neighbors, Christian neighbors who saved their neighbors. So there are many stories like that, but not at the magnitude you have the violence happening. Because at many places, people who wanted to protect also were threatened, beaten as well. And there are places where their homes were also attacked. But there were many stories like that.
Which story has stayed with you the most amongst all of them? And
I think from where I got the title of the book.
84 ki ladki.
Main 84 ki ladki. And when a teenager, when she narrated it, that she's still single, and she narrated the story that she told her mother, "Mummy, mainu chhad ke na jaye." Those words never left me, because her mother was waiting outside for her.
Now, after this book, we are living in a very digital world where everything is tuk, tweets, WhatsApp, and internet. How does a book find its place in it? How do you mobilize people to read about it, to know this part of history, and pick this physical thing which is so alien to the new generation?
You ask about the business of it?
The business of it, yes, we are going to cover. When HarperCollins getting them on board that I'm writing this, that journey, there must have been challenges there also to take this out.
No.
Have you faced any resistance or anything?
To be very honest, it was very easy.
All right, good. You're lucky one on that.
Yeah, it was very easy. I had Josie Joseph. He's a very well-renowned investigative journalist. I love his books. I just narrated the story to Josie.
Okay.
And then the book happened.
And who were the people who helped you in this book? You mentioned quite a bit of them. What were their collective contributions?
A lot of my friends, my agent Kanishka, my editor. I would say it's an army of people who helped me.
In the last few pages, you've mentioned how you filed RTIs, and a lot of them went unanswered. I think some of them have been wiped from history itself, and they said, "Sardar aaya jo RTI law RTI wala Sardar." So, were you able to get answers to your RTI? Because that's an open chapter in this book, because you keep filing and you keep asking for more. Because I think at that time FIRs were also fudged. Whatever they were saying, something else was being written.
So they basically, the FIRs, I would say, they were filed in a very omnibus fashion. So that was one reason most of the cases fell flat in the court. About the RTI, it had been challenging, but I got responses to many, but also didn't get responses to way too many.
Which ones you didn't get response to?
I wanted to know about the school dropout rate. That how many children stopped coming to these schools. That was never answered, because I really wanted to know that how many students actually didn't go back to school.
Did you ever find out generally off the record?
Generally, when you speak with people, you realize, they will tell you that they stopped going to school because they were harassed in school, they were bullied in school, they were called Sikh kebabs. So they didn't go back. And many of them said that they wanted to prepare for the exams, but they couldn't go because they were in depression.
Going back, if you rewind, your grandmother also came during partition at Kaurs.
Yeah.
So a lot of the journey of your story begins from there. Can you tell us how that impacted you? Because you've had very strong women in your households. I think they have been, they've influenced you a lot. In what way? In what manner?
They have, definitely. And like I said, the intergenerational trauma stays with you. When you've grown up hearing stories of partition, that what has happened with them, how they've rebuilt their lives.
Because you've got enough, I think more than enough research material. Probably there might be some more stories you want to share, or pick a thread of one story and talk about it.
I have not decided yet.
You've not decided.
Yeah.
Right now you're going with this. This is your first book, right?
This is my first book.
All right. Do you feel the youth attracted to this book? Have you seen them? Because I always feel that should the generations know about what has happened, should we pass on that burden to them?
I would say it's not a burden. It's
That
it's their history.
because-
They should know about it.
Yeah, history then, but it leaves an anger unresolved. War is not an answer to a war. That anger doesn't simmer down. It is unresolved.
It helps you to decide what is right and what is wrong.
Feel
History,
their children have decided. Some of them have actually just left everything and moved. The mothers, the Kaurs, their children, most of them are not with them.
So when I think history is, as a oral historian, I would say my job is to document the episodes in history, to keep it. And again, like, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not expecting neither.
Maybe someone
you know,
can
neither-
make a series.
Neither a business, neither I'm just thinking of what excites people, right? Because when you write history, you're not writing it from that perspective. You're writing
History is always subjective.
maybe, yes. But when my idea of writing this book is to document what has happened with women. I never had the idea that, is it exciting enough or not, or how should I say it, or how should I make it more exciting? No, that wasn't my thing.
So these women, are you in touch with them? Are they still being harassed by the powers?
Not really. To those,
Moving
yes,
to
who are
peace.
pursuing the case. Peace, I mean, how do you think peace will come?
I think they are living without being harassed.
Yeah, but in trauma.
Or the trauma is unaddressed because
course
there's
it
no closure.
Yeah.
They've been through it. They're living hell.
Yeah.
They're living hell. So yeah, that is there. And history, because with every government, history acquires a new form. It's according to them. How do you then protect what you've written?
That's why you have books of oral history, that you don't have opinions. You're not scared of governments. You write, however, you write the way the survivors tell you their stories.
In your course in the 8 years, were you ever received any threatening or harassing calls, or followed, or, any challenges while writing this book?
None.
I think then you were ordained and destined to write and tell their stories. Have there been more books written? I'm a little clueless about that. Have there been any more books written which encapsulates the trauma of women of 1984?
There are, my mentors, in fact, I will say there are fantastic books by Harminder Kaur, Uma Chakravarti, and there are many others as well. There's one book by Janelle Singh as well. But again, they also talk about the other aspects of it. So mine was only very focused on women.
Thank you, Sanam, for your time.